All right, let's dive into the world of Brené Brown.
Ooh.
You guys handed us a whole stack of her work.
Yeah, lots to unpack.
Excerpts from Dare to Lead, and some bonus quotes, too.
Huh.
Looks like we're tackling leadership, vulnerability, and courage. Get ready for a deep dive.
Brené Brown's a real pioneer, Decades of research into this stuff, so we're in good hands. We'll get some serious insights into what makes those great leaders tick, how they build those truly strong teams.
I love how Brown uses humor to connect.
Yeah.
Makes it all very approachable.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, remember that anecdote, the one where she thought sea level meant something completely different?
Oh, yeah, the sea level thing.
She thought it meant, like, down-to-earth people.
Casual, relatable.
Imagine her surprise when she realized sea level meant CEOs and top executives.
Uh-huh. Yeah, what a picture.
It's just so great how she disarms her audience and makes those kind of intimidating topics feel accessible.
For sure.
And I appreciate how she just ditches all the business jargon.
Yeah.
Her husband actually gave her the best advice. He said, don't use any of those dumbass words.
Smart man.
It's funny, but it just shows her commitment to clear communication.
Absolutely, and that's so crucial for building trust and connection. Those are really essential for effective leadership. And Brown's research really highlights how vulnerability, which we often see as a weakness, is actually the bedrock of courage.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. Brown discovered that courage isn't some mystical quality.
Like something you're born with, right?
Yeah, you either have it or you don't.
Right.
But it's actually a set of 4 skills.
Skills that can be learned, observed, and measured.
It's like, whoa, wait a minute. You're telling me I'm not stuck with whatever level of courage I think I have?
It's not about some innate quality, no. You can develop these skills, and Brown gives us the roadmap.
I'm ready. Tell me more about these 4 skill sets. What are they?
All right, so we've got rumbling with vulnerability, living into our values, braving trust, and learning to rise.
Whoa, those sound pretty intense.
They are powerful.
I'm guessing the foundation of all this is the willingness to be vulnerable.
Absolutely, 100%. Without that willingness to be open, embrace discomfort, show up authentically, the rest just can't happen. Like trying to build a house without a solid foundation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of vulnerability, Brown tells this powerful story about how she almost cut her own head off with a lightsaber.
Oh, yeah.
Unrealistic deadlines, a stressed out team, and a whole lot of introspection.
It's such a powerful metaphor, isn't it? But what's really fascinating is how that kind of fear-driven behavior hurts us, especially as leaders. When we're operating from that place of fear, we tend to micromanage, avoid those tough conversations, and create a culture of anxiety. And that just stifles creativity, innovation, and the psychological safety that teens need to thrive.
So it's not just about avoiding burnout for ourselves. It's about creating an environment where people can actually do their best work. What did Brown and her team do to address this lightsaber situation?
Well, they had to have some really honest conversations, acknowledging weaknesses and all. And then they implemented new meeting practices for better communication, clearer accountability.
So practical steps for a pretty emotionally charged situation. I like it. What else?
Well, they started focusing on what Brown calls gritty faith, that unwavering belief in the goal, combined with gritty facts, a really clear-eyed view of the challenges.
I get the gritty faith part, but isn't focusing on gritty facts kind of, well, pessimistic?
It's a common concern, but Brown argues that ignoring the facts, no matter how challenging they are, just sets us up for failure. It's about acknowledging reality, but maintaining that belief in the possibility of success.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about a clear-eyed view of the path, not just charging forward blindly. This reminds me of that story Brown tells about the Air Force commander, the one who was so inspired by her work that he, instead of using vague language, he started asking his airmen a very direct question. Are you lonely?
Yeah, such a simple change.
Powerful, though.
It really opened up honest conversations about well-being and fostered deeper connections.
Such a small shift with a huge impact. It highlights how the language we use, especially as leaders, can either shut down vulnerability or invite it in.
Completely. Asking, are you lonely? It's an act of courage, It signals you care, that you're willing to create that safe space, and it encourages others to do the same.
It seems that vulnerability really is a strength, especially in leadership. But Brown also talks about those 5 armored leadership behaviors, right?
Yes, the ones that prevent us from being vulnerable, from showing up authentically.
So what are they?
Okay, so we've got perfectionism, working from scarcity and foreboding joy, numbing, needing to be right, and hiding behind cynicism. But here's the thing. Brown doesn't just label these as bad, you know?
She emphasizes that this armor comes from somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Often it's to protect ourselves from vulnerability and shame.
Right, and that's important to remember. It's not about beating ourselves up for having these tendencies. It's about recognizing them, understanding their roots, and choosing courage instead.
It's like she's saying, hey, let's get curious about this armor, see where it came from, and figure out a better way to protect ourselves.
I like that. Because that armor might have served us well in the past, but it's probably holding us back now.
Okay, so how do we start to unpack all this, to address those tricky trust issues? Doesn't Brown have a framework for that?
She does. It's called the Braving Inventory. It breaks down trust into 7 key elements: boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity.
Whoa, that's quite the list. I have to admit, I'm a little lost.
Yeah.
Can we spend some time unpacking this braving inventory? Seems like a pretty powerful tool.
Absolutely. Let's dive into that in our next section. It's worth exploring in detail. Okay, so you asked about the Braving Inventory. It's not just a fancy name. It's a really practical tool for understanding how trust works. Think of it like a checklist for healthy relationships, with a colleague, a friend, even with yourself.
Okay, I like checklists. Break it down for me. What are these 7 elements?
All right, let's start with boundaries. Respecting each other's limits, being clear about what you're comfortable with, what you're not, being able to say no when you need to, and hold your ground.
So it's not just about setting boundaries for others, but also for ourselves.
Yes, like recognizing your own limits, not overcommitting or taking on too much, respecting your own needs and well-being.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. What about reliability?
Reliability is about doing what you say you're going to do, being consistent, dependable. People need to be able to count on you.
Reliability seems pretty straightforward, but I bet it goes deeper than just, like, showing up on time for meetings.
Definitely. It's about being someone others can rely on, not just for tasks, but emotionally, too. Being there for someone when they need you, offering that support.
Okay, what about accountability?
Accountability is owning your mistakes, apologizing when you mess up, and making amends, taking responsibility for your actions and how they impact others.
So no blaming others or making excuses.
Exactly. It's about saying, hey, I screwed up, and I'm going to make it right.
I like that. Okay, what about this vault thing? I know even Brown was confused about this one at first.
Right. She thought it was about keeping company secrets. But it's actually about confidentiality and discretion, not sharing information that's not yours to share, respecting people's privacy, not gossiping.
So being trustworthy with information people confide in us, whether it's personal or professional, not spilling secrets.
Exactly. Then there's integrity, choosing courage over comfort, doing what's right even when it's hard, standing up for your values.
Integrity seems like a core value for Brown herself. It's
Yeah.
about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Absolutely, aligning your actions with your values, even when no one's watching. And then we have non-judgment, being able to ask for what you need without shame, and listening to someone's struggles without judging them.
So creating a safe space for both ourselves and others to be vulnerable.
Yes. And recognizing that we're all works in progress, We all make mistakes, we all deserve compassion.
Okay, and finally, generosity.
Generosity is assuming the best in people, giving them the benefit of the doubt, recognizing their efforts and intentions.
So approaching others with kindness and understanding, not cynicism or suspicion.
Exactly. Recognizing that everyone is doing the best they can with what they've got.
Wow, that's a really comprehensive framework for understanding trust. It seems like these elements are all connected, like threads in a tapestry.
They are. And if one thread is weak or broken, it weakens the whole thing. But the good news is we can strengthen those threads through awareness, intention, and practice.
This braving inventory seems super useful, not just for leaders, but for anyone who wants to build stronger relationships.
Absolutely. A tool we can all benefit from.
So we've talked about vulnerability as the foundation for courage, and we've explored this braving inventory for understanding trust. But how do we actually cultivate that courage, especially when we've been knocked down or experienced setbacks? Doesn't Brown have a process for that? Something about learning to rise?
She does. It's a 3-part process she calls the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution. It's all about transforming those difficult experiences into opportunities for growth and resilience.
Okay, I'm feeling a little bruised just thinking about it. Tell me more. What's this reckoning stage all about?
It's about acknowledging the emotional impact of a situation, Recognizing those stories we tell ourselves about what happened and how those stories are shaping our perceptions and behaviors.
So hitting the pause button on our knee-jerk reactions and really trying to understand what's going on inside.
Exactly. Slowing down that emotional whirlwind into becoming aware of the narratives we're creating. And a lot of times, those narratives are based on fear, shame, or assumptions, not facts.
And this is where Brown's idea of the story I'm making up comes in handy, right?
Oh, yeah. It's about recognizing that the story we're telling ourselves, it might not be the whole truth or even true at all.
Right. So once we've identified those stories, then we can start to rumble with them. That's where the real work begins.
It does.
Okay, the rumble. This sounds intense. Is it like a verbal wrestling match with our inner critic?
It can feel that way sometimes. The rumble is about getting curious about our emotions and stories, challenging our assumptions, exploring different perspectives, digging deeper to understand why we react the way we do.
So not suppressing or denying those difficult emotions, but leaning into them, trying to understand them.
Yes. Brown talks about asking ourselves questions like, what am I feeling? What's the story I'm making up? What more do I need to learn? It's approaching those uncomfortable emotions with curiosity and compassion, not judgment or fear.
I'm starting to see how this could be transformative, but it also sounds exhausting. Where does the revolution come in?
The revolution is about rewriting our narratives, based on what we learned during the reckoning and the rumble. It's choosing courage over comfort and moving forward with greater self-awareness, resilience, and what Brown calls grounded confidence.
Okay, grounded confidence. I've heard that term a few times now. What exactly does Brown mean by that?
Grounded confidence is about showing up authentically, even when you're feeling uncertain or vulnerable. It's not about pretending to be something you're not or hiding your imperfections.
So it's the opposite of fake it till you make it.
Exactly. It's about embracing your whole self, strengths and weaknesses, and showing up with honesty and integrity.
I love that. It's a much more empowering and sustainable approach than trying to project an image of perfection. But this learning to rise process, it all sounds great in theory, but how do we actually put it into practice, especially as leaders? Any tips for us mere mortals?
Well, Brian offers some really practical strategies for cultivating grounded confidence, and it starts with curiosity.
Curiosity. So asking lots of questions, being interested in learning, that seems pretty basic.
Yeah. It is, but it's also much deeper than you might think. Brown says that curiosity is an act of vulnerability and courage. Because when we're curious, we're admitting that we don't have all the answers. We're opening ourselves up to new perspectives, the possibility of being wrong.
That can be scary, especially in a leadership role where we're expected to have the answers.
Yeah.
I can see how that takes courage.
It does. But Brown argues that true leadership is not about knowing everything. It's about being willing to learn and grow with your team.
That's refreshing. So how do we actually cultivate more curiosity?
It starts with being mindful of the language we use. Brown suggests using phrases like, the story I'm making up is, I'm curious about, help me understand. They're great for inviting dialogue, exploring different perspectives, creating that safe space for open communication.
Those are great prompts. It seems like it's not just about asking the questions, but really listening to the answers, trying to understand where the other person is coming from.
Absolutely. Active listening, empathy, creating a culture where people feel safe to share, even if their thoughts and feelings are different from our own.
This reminds me of Brown's point about horizon conflict, how people in different roles might have different perspectives based on their responsibilities.
Right, like a CEO might be focused on a 10-year horizon, while an operations manager is more concerned with a 6-month timeline. And if those different perspectives aren't acknowledged, it can lead to misunderstandings, conflict, and a breakdown in trust.
Makes sense. We're all
Yeah.
looking at the same picture, but maybe from different angles.
Exactly. And it's important to recognize and honor those different perspectives. Curiosity helps bridge those gaps, to see the world through each other's eyes.
So curiosity is key for grounded confidence. What else do we need?
Practice Brown emphasizes that developing any skill, whether it's playing piano or leading a team, requires consistent practice and a willingness to make mistakes. She talks about how even professional athletes spend hours practicing the fundamentals, even though they might never use those exact drills in a game.
So it's about building those mental muscles, that muscle memory, so when the pressure's on, we can rely on our skills.
Yes. And it's not about striving for perfection, it's about embracing the learning process, recognizing that failure is a part of growth.
And that's where self-compassion comes in, right?
Absolutely. If we're constantly beating ourselves up for mistakes, we're less likely to take risks, to learn and grow. Self-compassion is about acknowledging our imperfections and offering ourselves grace instead of judgment.
So not letting ourselves off the hook, but approaching our mistakes with a growth mindset.
Precisely. It's about asking, what can I learn from this? How can I do better? Rather than dwelling on shame and self-criticism.
This goes back to Brown's point about living into our values.
Hmm.
She argues that we can't be authentic leaders if we're not clear about what we stand for.
Absolutely. It starts with identifying those core values.
Yeah.
Brown encourages us to really narrow it down, one or two that resonate, rather than a long list of vague aspirations.
And once we've identified those values, it's about putting them into practice, even when it's tough.
Right, because living into our values requires courage.
Yeah.
Making choices that align with our beliefs, even when they're unpopular or uncomfortable.
Brown has a great example of this from her own life, right? She talks about how her core values are faith and courage, and how her commitment to her family, which is incredibly important to her, is actually fueled by those values.
It is. It's a beautiful illustration of how values can guide our actions, even in the most personal areas.
And she emphasizes that our values shouldn't feel like a choice. They should be so ingrained that they become our default. Living with integrity, making those choices that align with our beliefs, even when it's hard.
And that kind of integrity builds trust and respect, both in ourselves and in others.
Okay, so we've got curiosity, practice, self-compassion, and living into our values. Any other strategies for cultivating grounded confidence and learning to rise?
Brown talks a lot about setting boundaries for ourselves and others. She says boundaries are essential for protecting our well-being and preventing burnout.
That's especially important in a work culture that often glorifies busyness. It's like wearing busyness as a badge of honor.
It's true, and it's not sustainable. Brown encourages us to challenge that culture. Prioritize rest, play, recovery. We can't pour from an empty cup, right? Taking care of ourselves is essential for being effective leaders.
So setting boundaries around our time, energy, emotional capacity, saying no to things that drain us, making space for things that nourish us.
Exactly, and it's not selfish. It's essential.
It sounds like cultivating this grounded confidence and learning to rise is a lifelong journey, not a destination.
It is. It takes practice, self-reflection, a willingness to be vulnerable.
It's fascinating how the path to strength and resilience leads through vulnerability.
It is a paradox, but it's true. Our imperfections, they're not something to be ashamed of. They're a source of strength and connection.
And I think that's a perfect place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Brené Brown's work. But before we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect on what resonated with you most, what you might want to take away from this exploration of vulnerability, courage, and daring leadership. As we wrap up this deep dive into Brené Brown's work, one thing that really sticks with me is her emphasis on the power of language.
Oh, for sure. She's got a lot to say about how the words we use can either shut down vulnerability or, really create a space for it to flourish.
It's like that story about the Air Force commander, the one who, inspired by Brown, he started asking his airmen, "Are you lonely?" instead of using more generic language.
Powerful story, right? It's such a small change, but the impact was just huge. It highlights how that clear, honest language, it's essential for building trust and connection.
And I think it goes even deeper than just avoiding jargon or buzzwords.
Yeah, totally. It's about really choosing words that accurately reflect our emotions, our experiences. Brown encourages us to kind of expand our emotional vocabulary so we can really articulate those nuances of what we're feeling.
Because if we can't name it, we can't tame it, right?
Exactly. And this emotional literacy, it's so essential for empathy, for self-compassion, and for being able to rise after we experience those setbacks. It lets us understand ourselves better and connect with others on a deeper level.
And that feels like something we can all work on, no matter where we're at with our own emotional intelligence.
100%. And Brown gives us some great tools for this. Remember those empathy myth scenarios she talks about?
Oh yeah, those are so helpful. They help us recognize those common ways we kind of stumble when we're trying to connect with someone who's struggling.
Right, like when we offer sympathy instead of empathy, or when we try to fix the problem instead of just listening, or, that mighty fall thing, where we're disappointed in someone because they haven't lived up to our own unrealistic expectations of perfection.
It's like we forget they're human too.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we all struggle, we all mess up, we all need support sometimes. And, when we can offer that support with empathy and understanding, it creates that foundation for trust and connection. It seems like so much of Brown's work is about normalizing imperfection, creating a culture where it's okay to be human.
It really is. And that kind of culture is essential for daring leadership, Because if we're constantly worried about making mistakes or appearing weak, we're less likely to take risks, to innovate, to really lead with courage.
It's like this fascinating paradox, right? Vulnerability fosters trust, which in turn creates space for more vulnerability. It's this beautiful cycle that can really transform not just individuals, but teams and even whole organizations.
Absolutely. It all starts with that willingness to rumble with the vulnerability, to embrace those imperfections, and to choose courage over comfort.
So much of Brown's work is about that choice, that commitment to courage. As we wrap up, what are you left pondering? What's resonating with you most?
One thing that keeps coming back to me is how Brown emphasizes that we don't have to do this alone. We can lean on each other, support each other, learn from each other. This journey of courage and vulnerability, it's better together.
That's such a powerful reminder, and a hopeful one, too. So as we conclude our exploration of Brené Brown's work, I hope you're walking away with some new tools, some new perspectives for navigating leadership, vulnerability, and, that ongoing journey of daring to be your true self. It's not always easy, but it's so worth it.